Hello, and welcome to Tambellini Group's March Top of Mind podcast. I'm your host, Liz Farrell. This month, we're exploring the topic of digital accessibility on campus. We all know that when the pandemic forced an abrupt pivot to remote learning, it surfaced a lot of challenges and limitations that were stemming from the widespread use of teaching and learning technologies. And we also know that the remote environment had uneven and often detrimental impacts on many students and faculty for various reasons. Despite their best efforts, many colleges struggled to create a more equitable virtual campus on the fly, as they took an ad hoc approach to finding workaround solutions to the problems that arose during a quite unpredictable time when everyone was clearly overextended. But as a silver lining, faculty and institutional leadership across the country were forced to more closely examine how issues of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion were affecting their communities on multiple fronts, especially when it came to technology. As things settled into a new normal, we saw more institutions forming DEI committees and elevating DEI leaders to explore more ways to remove barriers and improve digital accessibility to help all students succeed. So where are we now? In a world where AI and data analytics are becoming all the more pervasive, along with concerns about their biases, what steps can and should institutions take to ensure digital accessibility? Our guest today is the ideal expert to answer those questions. I'm so excited to be joined by Mr. Brian Fodrey, who serves as Assistant Vice President of Business Innovation at Carnegie Mellon University, where he has been a key leader involved in building CMU's Digital Accessibility Office since it was founded in 2021. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, we appreciate having you. Let's start off with some level setting here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and the institution you're at?
Sure. So I've been very fortunate to work in higher education for over 20 years now at all different types of institutions. Over the course of that time, I've had the opportunity to grow as a leader and gain experience in working formally as a CIO and Vice Provost for Educational Technology, as well as an adjunct instructor. In my current role at CMU, I've had the chance to work with partners all across our campus, and including along with the responsibility for the Digital Accessibility Office, which has really allowed me to draw on my experience and help in leading what is considered to be a very important initiative here at CMU.
Yeah, that's a great way to start us off, because you mentioned there the opportunity in this role to work with a lot of partnerships, collaborate with a lot of different groups. So why don't we begin with a definition of digital accessibility in the broadest sense. I've read this great article with predictions from all these experts in Campus Technology magazine, and actually our CEO was one of the people quoted there as well. But there was something you said that really struck me. You said digital accessibility is far more than a regulatory and compliance measure associated with risk mitigation or a content design strategy. So what do you mean by that? Like, what is this, again, broad definition of digital accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about digital accessibility, I really think of three words: understanding, access, and equity. Digital accessibility shouldn't be considered, when just a software application is written or a website designed or a PDF composed. It's really everywhere in our lives, from how we evaluate and procure digital solutions, for our respective organizations, consume digitized content. Technology is simply a tool, and it certainly has a role in digital accessibility. But in the end, where I come from is a shared place of understanding that digital presence and content should be and can be accessed equitably by all.
It's a very holistic understanding of how it works. It's not just sort of a check the box on, does this tool have closed captioning? Sounds like.
Right.
Yeah. So,
although an important aspect.
A very important aspect, which I hope we get to more in a bit. But what is the ideal state of digital accessibility? We've got a definition there, right? If you're thinking of, gosh, you could have everything at every institution in the most ideal way to serve every student, what would that look like from a digital accessibility perspective?
Yeah, this is a great question, and and giving it some thought, I tried to make a compare contrast. So, the best way I can describe it is something that is innate to how we interface with digital content and other technology-driven functions.
Mhm.
I sometimes think about digital accessibility similar to how a lot of organizations aspire their information security program, for example. A hallmark to a good information security program is it's baked into how a person leverages a particular tool or service to achieve their respective goal, right? Whether that's through access, content delivery, just to name a few examples. But with an underpinning that there's a shared value for both the organization and the person of their own digital safety. I would love to be in a place where digital accessibility was top of mind. Again, to steal from your podcast title, that but those that think about and are responsible for the design of technology, as well as sort of more broadly digital content in general. Because ultimately design and consumption are codependent.
I like that. Can you explain to us a bit what you mean by that statement? Design and consumption are codependent.
Yeah, I mean, I think one informs the other, right? So I mean, I think the natural dependency between the way we develop something and the way it's ultimately consumed through any development life cycle, it's a cyclical feedback loop, right? So making sure that we're considering the end result and the manner for which we're designing will prove for a better result all around. And my thinking is digital accessibility, just as if we would think about user experience and making sure the buttons on the right versus the left, or the person reads left to right. We're baking that into the way we're thinking about our designing of technology, and ultimately the way we intend people to consume it, but frankly how we're meeting them where they'll consume it.
It's interesting as you say that. I see this parallel between what you were saying earlier about the information security program. Like it seems to be the same thing would apply to information security, right? Because you've got to think about, well, this is how we would hope people would use it, but ideally, like maybe we do need two-factor authentication there because of what could happen.
Exactly.
Um, so I would assume just because this is true of everything in higher ed, there's probably a lot of variance in how institutions operate when it comes to their awareness and how far along they are in the continuum for digital accessibility. Like do you think that this is something that's there's widespread awareness of the need for it? Like would you say there's a continuum and there's an average university sort of where they're at, or any sort of post-secondary institution?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think there's an awareness, and I certainly think that there is, kind of room for growth across the board for all across higher ed. Thinking about, kind of beyond awareness and sort of how you kind of take the general sort of spatial understanding that digital accessibility is out there, moving into action. Digital accessibility is a team sport. Just like cybersecurity, community involvement is a hallmark to how successful any one institution can be. From content creators like faculty and instructional designers to technicians, that could include software developers, technical support, to procurement, legal, and finance teams, contracting, compliance policy, all pillars to any institution that you would find, and including vendors, and where most institutions rely on the vendor for more than just licensing. I mean, everybody should have an awareness, but also a role to play in digital accessibility at that institution.
So when you say everyone should have awareness, but they also need like there's a role that they have to play, that takes me to, you came on to CMU when this digital accessibility office was just getting off the ground. Do you think that many institutions have this type of office designated?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't know, have any visibility into, which and how many, or even institution types, have specific digital accessibility offices or operate within a name or title as such. But, thinking about it more broadly, the absence of the title or office at any one institution, I don't think should imply disinterest or non-compliance. So if you're listening today and thinking, I don't have a digital accessibility office, I would probably argue and firmly believe that most, if not all, institutions do have advocates throughout their organizations that are encouraging others to think about and influence their work in a way that, would meet digital accessibility standards. But also have processes and work tasks that support digital accessibility in some way. They might just call it that, or it might be baked into a larger effort. And I think, there can be reward, and oftentimes a good place to start is sort of sussing that out and sort of starting to sort of see what work is already being done on your campus and how you can either build on that momentum or start to catalog it in a way that allows you to kind of take audit and decide where to go next.
And I think you had mentioned too that there are the focus, particularly with the office at your institution, is threefold on this outreach, awareness, and compliance.
Yep.
Can you explain those sort of three legs of the stool there? A little bit about each?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love being a part of a formal digital accessibility office. So as much as I say, I think there's a lot of work that's probably already being done. Having a formal, digital accessibility office within our campus community, to achieve those to work towards, I should say, to work towards those three tenets, really does allow us to empower our campus community to move forward in a positive direction and create a shared understanding and appreciation for how digital accessibility fits into that role. The outreach, specifically outreach, awareness, and compliance, you can, if you take the time they are all interrelated and codependent of each other, right? So one informs the other, similar way we talked earlier, but in different ways. For outreach, for the digital accessibility office I'm a part of now, really taking the opportunity when it's afforded to us, or kind of pursuing them when they're available, is really connecting with our community in a way that sort of announces both our presence, but also the resources and support we're able to provide. From an awareness standpoint, again, things that we've talked about already, but really, starting to find that people start to think about digital accessibility in a more proactive and deliberate way. But then also, more than that, find ways to sort of scaffold them up and offer opportunities for people to sort of really take steps in their growth in this space in terms of technical training and things like that. And then compliance, of course, is an underpinning for a lot of it, because it's really, like most things, it allows us to really have footing and sort of something to kind of draw back to and refer to as we think about how we prioritize resources and the work that we need to accomplish, that governs things that far beyond our one institution.
Yeah, and I think of compliance is always the trickiest thing, and I don't want to get into the weeds on that or anything,
Right.
but it must also be helpful that there are, some external standards, so it's not all just on the institution to decide how it's defined, that there are sort of national best practices or standards in place.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and one thing I even, failed to mention at the question about sort of the digital accessibility presence within even a campus. Digital accessibility offices just in general also don't always sit organizationally in the same place too. So I think about, there are people that are probably at an institution that may not even be aware that there is a digital accessibility office because of their visibility to any one different part of the institution. So, I think there's also, a lot of creative freedom and sort of license with any one institution, sort of the way it aligns itself. So again, it's just another lessons learned that I've had, is that there is no one standardized way of the way these offices sort of take shape and sort of take hold into one institution.
But as you mentioned, the awareness being a big part of the approach there, to your point,
Right.
that, if they sit in different places and people aren't aware of them, it's not so much where they sit, it's, well, how much visibility do people have of the services available and how to take advantage of them, no
Right.
matter where it
Yeah.
sits, sounds like.
Exactly.
So not every institution is exactly where it wants to be on all this. Some are probably pretty far behind. I mean, why do you think that we've had 3 years now, actually, of trial by fire, with everyone having, it seemed like on a daily basis, things were popping up. Gosh, we never thought about the fact that some of our students don't have any quiet place to take a course, interact with their classmates, do other things remotely at home. We didn't think about how certain students with learning differences might be impacted by proctoring software or other things. Why do you think still to this day, after all that time and effort, that some institutions are still behind or not where they'd like to be? Like, why do you think this is?
Yeah, I mean, I think most institutions have a lot coming at them at one time. And
Hmm.
time, money, resources are limited. And so I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. And a formal office or title isn't necessarily the only barometer to how an institution approaches digital accessibility. But I do think, we all could agree, like you mentioned earlier, Liz, already, that more can be done. And in some cases it is being done, but the process is iterative. And hopefully more and more institutions started making investments in this space in a way that makes sense for them, versus the sort of one size fits all, this is the only way we can move forward thinking. Because again, like I said, I think there is no done in this space. It
Hmm.
continues to be an iterative opportunity for everyone.
Uh, with everything with technology, right? Because the ground's
Right.
always moving beneath our feet, so we have to
Right.
figure out how these various things can help, hinder, or augment other priorities. There was something else I noticed on Carnegie Mellon's the digital accessibility office webpage. I read that improving accessibility improves the user experience for everyone. Um, and that to me seems like something, oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. Like, why would I need something, for someone who's hearing impaired? I'm not hearing impaired, or other examples of that. I mean, can you explain what you mean by that? What
Yeah.
the office means by that, rather?
Right, right. That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. And our intent was really to sort of bring visibility to digital accessibility in the fashion that you're bringing, right? Sort of open the dialogue. And it's something I've learned working in this space, that how people interact with technology and consume digital content is personal, and it
Mm,
doesn't always look the way you might traditionally think about accessibility. Excuse me. I think about things like comprehension, learning style, situational setting, context, learning environment, or frankly, just a person's general comfort, like you mentioned, in terms of sort of their personal situation of where they study, where they work, where they, do these things. Ensuring we are offering experiences to our community that meets them where they are is critical to their success and ultimately ours, because that's why we're here. So why not think about digital accessibility through the lens of improved user experience for all, rather than as an accommodation or exception?
yeah, because it is something we all need. I mean, we all have the ways we're most receptive to gathering information. Like, I know I'm very bad at, which is ironic to say we're having a podcast conversation, but absorbing information orally. Like, it is better for me to
Right.
read along to something. Which brings me to something I also noticed on the website page that speaks to your point, and it said 90% of students use closed captioning to improve their comprehension of multimedia. That's not 90% of students who have some sort of processing challenge. That's just students in general. So I think that speaks very aptly to the point you're making there, that there are things that improve and give options to everyone.
Well, it does, and I think it goes back to what you and I mentioned earlier about sort of the idea that design and consumption are hand in hand, right? It's there is purpose and practice for understanding the way designing our content with the idea of at least having some informedness to how we expect people to consume it,
Hmm.
rather than what we expect people, the expected way to how we think people will consume it. And I think that's a great, I mean, that statistic alone should sort of enlighten that, right? That closed captioning is being utilized by a population of people that you might not otherwise think that only maybe 5% is using it or something like that. So being sort of deliberate and thinking about that on the front end, I think really does sort of open your eyes and ultimately make for a better user experience for everyone. Which, like I said, go back to what I just mentioned. Why not think about digital accessibility as an improved user experience rather than just as an accommodation?
Yeah. And it's just even sometimes a convenience thing. Like I think of when
Right.
I'm scrolling through my phone, I follow a lot of media sites and news sites, and they'll have great little video stories, but I don't usually have the sound for my phone on. And I love
Right.
that it always has the text scrolling, but I would never think to ask for that or to configure it to
Right.
do it. But it means I'm going to get more content than I normally would because I may be doing something else where the sound is on. So
Exactly.
it's really, really cool the way you've described that there. Um, there's also a fundamental principle I know you all have at CMU, and I think that this is a best practice a lot of people would say, and that is that everyone is responsible for making sure the resources they create are digitally accessible. But then I also think of, oh, that's great in practice, but then there's that old saying that when everyone is responsible, no one is accountable.
Right.
So clearly there is a need for programs and standards. So you're coming off of, and I know you're presenting on this at a conference in the
Right.
very near future, like the first year of building this big program. So it can be daunting always to know where to start. I mean, where do you begin in building this? Is it the culture? Is it something else where you have this collective responsibility, but also there's clear roles and accountability for honoring that responsibility?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And I think, I'll start by going back, to something we talked about a second ago, the information security, digital accessibility, like information security, is everyone's responsibility, right?
Mhm.
So, and most institutions are big places, and everyone has a hand in making sure we're doing our best and making it accessible as possible. Just like in cyber, if you get a spam email and don't click on the link and enter, click on the link and enter your login credentials, instead you report it. Same is true in digital accessibility, right? So if you find yourself or others around you with an accessibility or experience limitation as it relates to content or access, speak up and work with those at your institution that might be able to help. I mean, it's ultimately the responsibility of the institution. To your point about, well, in the end of the day, when it's everybody's, it's nobody's. I think at the end of the day, it's ultimately the responsibility of the institution or the content owner, the organization, to make sure those reporting structures exist. The outreach and training development are offered. Compliance is understood to help us prioritize and scale effort,
Mhm.
but ultimately, foster a culture of shared responsibility, and let it be celebrated and appreciated as a community of effort and learning, rather than sort of a very you know kind of uh, you know
Top down.
compliance driven measure. Yeah, top
Yeah.
down. Exactly. Yeah.
It's the if you see something, say something.
If
But
you, right, exactly. And I think there's just this innate fear of sort of reporting, either way. And I know there are contexts for why that some of that is, and the reporting things and things like that. So, I think, going back to the reporting structures, I think there's even opportunities there for people to provide that feedback without feeling connected to it in a way that makes them uncomfortable. So again, all spaces for learning and growth, but I think we just need to think of it as that way rather than sort of works or it doesn't.
mhm. So what would you say are the key components to a digital accessibility program? Like I know at Carnegie Mellon, it's in the office of the CIO. You've held a
Right.
CIO role before. You've been a teacher. You've been in ed tech. So again, knowing that there are variances, there's no one right way to do it. Can you talk about what are the different campus stakeholders and departments that do need to be involved for these efforts to work?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so many efforts, and it's like the award show at this point. If I start
Yeah.
listing people, I'm almost inevitably going to not list someone, and they're going to
Right.
say, someone listening is going to say, "Oh my gosh, what do you mean you didn't say them?" So I will say I think it should be a healthy dose of both administrative and academic units.
Okay.
But in thinking about, think it might be a little different based on institutional work chart, like you described, and what coordination needs to take place. So thinking about it a little bit more sort of abstractly, but with a takeaway is, my recommendation is we think of it like a governance model. Build recommend mechanisms like leadership groups, advisory councils, working groups, executive sponsorship. In this case, you really are embracing the community and shared responsibility way of thinking, like we talked about earlier. You're also creating a structure that would allow you to develop, charters of work, roadmaps, assessments, kind of brass tacks, rubber meets the road type of outcomes that start to bring efforts to light that may already be happening, like we
Mm-hmm.
also mentioned earlier. I mean, and it's just and it also allows you to make the case of inevitable, further investment and support moving forward. I think, if you can get the right initial select few of people participating in a structure that of some kind like that fosters collaboration, with clearly laid out goals, you can capitalize on their passion and advocacy, right?
Yeah.
A momentum towards digital accessibility, again, in a context and way that makes sense for you and your institution.
Yeah, it seems like from what you're saying, you can, there's not always one place where you have to start. It's more important just to start somewhere and build on that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, well
Um,
said.
what about with students? That was one thing, not to say the award thing, the one you forgot. I
Right.
mean, it seems like
Right.
it's important to have their
It is.
input as well.
Absolutely. So, we currently at CMU, we participate in a few different, student-driven organizations that allows us to, have feedback, but, more than, just sort of use them as a way to sort of solicit feedback and sort of
Mhm.
trial ideas and policies and initiatives and things like that. They really are partners.
Mhm.
That we have had plans or I said we have in the past, and as well as have plans to work with students as subject matter experts in this area. I mean, CMU, of course,
Interesting.
has a lot of super smart, talented people up and down the organization and up and into including students, and being able to leverage them for more than just their perspective and sort of allow them to show leadership in this space, just like we would in most other governing boards that we would have, in my past in IT. It really is, I think it's, when you think about resources and people and sort of trying to build a coalition of people that can actually do the work, I think your point is well taken. I think students can be an engine. It can help with that beyond just sort of be the final end product feedback group that you get and sort of find out if you did it right or wrong.
Right.
It really does offer different opportunities as well.
That's really interesting. So, um, at CMU, you've talked about, the students were involved in other things, and you mentioned so many different people involved. It must have been like very dynamic year. And I know this isn't all you're doing. So I
Right.
guess the next question could be, when do you sleep? But
Right.
um, let's just talk about what has been accomplished thus far
Yeah.
by the office here at CMU. Like, was there a first milestone you've
Right.
reached?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and this is going to be a direct shout out. So one of the first accomplishments was hiring a digital accessibility coordinator, and when we did that, we brought her in as both a subject matter expert as well as someone who could sort of bring a passion and commitment for working with the CMU community. Our
Okay.
goal at the time, our goal was and still is to build the trust with our campus partners and prioritize what we can do to help inform and support them where possible and empower them to continue to do the great work that they do for our community. We want digital accessibility to be viewed as not viewed as another duty as assigned or barrier, but really as sort of a as a resource and opportunity for people as they create their content. And the digital accessibility coordinator is immensely key in that. She is by far kind of the driver for so much of that. But some other milestones sort of beyond sort of that is seeing our influence beginning to inform the community, bringing digital accessibility into conversations that otherwise may not have been as prevalent, or just as a risk mitigation or compliance mechanism, and instead, as a proactive interest and desire. My proudest moments are, to be perfectly frank, is my proudest moments are when someone from the campus community reaches out to us and says,
Okay.
"Hey, we've attended one of your workshops, subscribed to your newsletter, attended one of the meetings we presented, visited our website, what have you." But it's caused them to think about their work differently.
Yeah.
And they want to talk with us about what might be possible for not just them, but the whole section of the campus community that they might be a part of or represent. And, and again, to the point about students, this ranges faculty, staff, and students. One more, if I may, is the facilitation of bringing digital accessibility expertise to the campus through formal education. So everything we've talked to up until now has been sort of very informal, for the lack of a better way to describe it, right? But it's
organic, I would say.
Organic, yes,
You're
exactly.
not giving yourself enough credit there,
Yeah.
because there has been a lot done, but you're right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
But our digital accessibility coordinator partnered with a professional association in the field, and they were, she's recruited key contributors across our spaces on campus, and formed essentially what we call a professional learning community that is designed as such that will yield them an opportunity to take an assessment to earn a related digital accessibility certification that's industry recognized.
Right.
So this is a way for us to sort of have this coalition effort of people across our campus that share an advocacy, share a passion, have a general interest and ability to influence their work. But now we're bringing new skills and that sort of, to their otherwise non-digital accessibility role, right? And it informs their work. So that one we're particularly excited about as well. And I think that will, again, just continue to build the credentials of digital accessibility within our institution in a little more formal way than sort of some of these other ways we've talked about.
It sounds, it's very much an agile model thing. You're trying a lot of different things.
That's right.
Let's experiment as we go and iterate as we go. I mean, it's really cool that way. And I love this barometer you have of, when someone of their own accord reaches out. That's a great, I think that if I were doing this work, that would be for me, oh, this is sticking. Like, they're coming to us now, right? It's not just all flowing one way.
That's right. Meeting. That's right. Just showing up at every meeting we can, right?
Yeah. Someone actually listened and thought about this. Wow.
That's right. That's right.
So what are the office's priorities and goals for the coming year? Now that you've got this groundwork laid, you've got people coming into the mold, you've got coming into the fold rather. You've got a lot of formal, informal education going on. What's next?
Yeah, I think the biggest next thing for us is in the coming months, we plan to pull together a campus-wide event focused around Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is on May 18th.
Okay.
This will be a great opportunity. This will be a great opportunity for our campus community to get, gather around, share, a shared topic of digital accessibility, workshop that, learn from each other, as well as from important contributors like we talked about earlier, in terms of people, getting certifications and sort of that group. But then also we're hoping to bring in some leading experts, some with particularly, within the CMU world and kind of have a day of digital accessibility and, global awareness. And, I think we're excited about it. It's something that expands our portfolio in terms of the way we've done outreach to our campus community. So I think that is certainly a date we have circled coming up in the coming year.
Nice. Is there what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned after now you've been there 2 years and with this office from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important lesson I've learned is that, while I think everyone can agree on its importance, and especially when you think about, we all work in higher education, or, the folks I work with work in higher education, and not everyone shares that passion or mandate for wanting to make or be a part of the change and work necessary. I mean, and again, I don't think it's because of a devaluing, but because not making the because I'm not sure they are always making the connection of how their work relates to ensuring it's digitally accessible.
Okay.
And I think that's our mandate, right? That's our challenge, right? It's our job to help close that misunderstanding and change approach. So, I think that is the one thing, you get this new office and you think, well, of course, we're going to just kind of, we build it and they will come. And I think there's more work to be done there than, and I think, eyes wide open is always probably the best approach for most things. And it certainly is here as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say you think you get this office and everything else. We always hear people say, if I only had the funding for this, if I only had, and it's never just that, right? You've got to, it's got to be more of that holistic cultural change and awareness that, let's face it, always takes time to build. No matter, you could have unlimited funds, unless you're going to go around and pay everyone $1 million to care about everything. Like, it's not
And
going to
even
start.
then, right?
Even
Like you
then,
said, I mean,
yeah,
it's even
yeah,
then, there's only so much time in the day. You're right. No, it's right. That's
exactly.
right.
Well, before we close things out, really enjoy this conversation with you. And I think it'd be great if you could share any advice with our listeners from this experience.
Yeah, I think be patient, calculated. I mean, the narrative you set early in the role of digital accessibility has within your institution is key. You know your organization's culture best, right? So take comfort in that and find ways to fold digital accessibility into the conversation if it isn't already. And build the support rapport you think is necessary for moving your priorities forward. Understanding that again, everything looks a little bit different within the walls of any given institution. So, but that being said, I will say one of the things that I took comfort in and sort of trying to conceptualize and sort of help build this forward is, I reached out to a lot of different colleagues and partners and peer schools early in the process just to understand, what they're doing and what and then take that information and sort of inform my approach and and I'm still doing that today. So and that's one of the great things about higher ed is there's such a community that's beyond just any one given institution. So I think this is no exception to that. And I think the more you can learn from others and then apply it in the context of your own setting, the better off you'll be.
That's great advice, Brian, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your insights and experience with all of us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Liz. I appreciate the opportunity.
And that concludes this month's Top of Mind podcast. Don't forget to check out our other podcasts, blogs, and videos at thetambolinigroup.com.